Hello and welcome to Nisht for Me, the podcast that examines the ins and outs of British Jewish culture.
Today is a very exciting day for us, not just because we're cozied up next to each other for the first time, but also we have a very, very special guest. We are very delighted to introduce Jonathan Freedland.
Jonathan is an award-winning journalist, best-selling novelist, and co-host of probably the biggest Jewish podcast in the world, Unholy, Two Jews on the News, which makes us feel like a very small outfit, but we're delighted to have you.
You know, in fact, Johnny, welcome, Johnny.
Thank you. Hello. It's very good to be here. Yeah, delighted.
When Aaron pitched this podcast to me, he was like, you know, we can be two Jews on anything but the news. And I was like, I'm not sure Johnny's going to let us have that as our tagline, but that's our shtick.
It would have a nice ring to it. I think it could work. I could see it maybe needs a little bit of work. But it's a good idea, though, because especially now, people want anything but the news. I think it's true. There's a real market for that. Mm-hmm. But the Melvin Bragg thing, In Our Times, which its slogan was never knowingly relevant. And, you know, I think you could snap that one up.
We'll take that. Yeah, we'll take that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on. And actually, we wanted to remind you of when we actually first met. We first met you together. I don't know if you know this. It was when you came to visit our Sevet, when we were Madrachim on Habonim Dror, and we were doing our pre-camp prep.
Yeah, sort of pioneer, they call it.
Yes. I reckon it's over 20 years ago we're talking, Johnny.
2002, I think. There's no way you would remember us specifically. We were amongst probably 20-odd
We were just little 17-year-old nebs, like trying to fit in.
No, I think this is with Holland camp, would it be?
I think it was when we used to go to France, when it was that little less anti-Semitic, and we used to take Jewish kids to France to do one all about Zionism.
I came along.
I think you spoke to us about the peace process as it was. This is how far back we're going. You now work alongside Jonathan at the Guardian Abs, which is how we come to have you here. And while we absolutely want to talk about your brand new book, which is already on the Sunday Times bestseller chart, richly deserved.
Before we get to Johnny, the sort of best-selling author, we just want to talk about Johnny the Jew. Johnny the British Jew is essentially what we would love to get into with you, because that's kind of our
let's
thing.
go there.
So we're going to start back in the day. We want to know...
How was your bris? We're not starting with that.
I love the way you said that with such sincerity. For a minute, I thought, oh my God, he really does want to summon up a memory. That was
we've been
very
speaking
disarming.
to people.
Yeah.
No, we want to know, what role did your Jewish identity play as a child in your childhood?
Oh, wow, huge. I mean... I don't want to anticipate my Hamish flex here.
Do it. You can put that in.
I can get ahead of that. I was a founding pupil of Colrena Nursery School associated with Elstree and Boreham Wood United Synagogue. And so I'm rather proud of that. And famously played, and it is famous, Judah Maccabee in the Colrena Nursery Hanukkah production. And the key line... which I didn't get to the end of because I was overcome with tears and nerves, was, I am Judah Maccabee, I'm as brave can be.
Wow.
But I never got to the end because I interrupted the word brave with just 3-year-old sob. I just couldn't say it.
I can imagine every Jewish mother sort of just crying their eyes out watching
Desperate for me to get to the end of the line. Literally but imagine of all the words to start blubbing on, was brave. I'm as brave as brave.
How different the story would be.
I mean, so, you know, and funnily enough, the other day I was asked for my very first political memory by... It was actually Prospect magazine, so nothing Hamish or Jewish going on there. And, you know, there were two answers. One was, I remember having bath time by candlelight during the 3-day week in 1973. Wow. So that's a political memory. But the real memory is being 6 years old in Elstree Shul on Yom Kippur, and this weird kind of nervousness and sort of angst passing around and people talking to each other. And of course, listeners to this know you're not meant to, you know, switch on TV or radio on Yom Kippur, but people clearly had. And they were suddenly the great oracles. The least religious people were suddenly the most respected people in the shul because they had information about what was the invasion of Israel by Syria and Jordan and Egypt that would become the Yom Kippur War. And seeing all the adults looking so anxious and terrified, that really had a huge, I would have been 6, and that had a very, very big impact. The reason I tell you both those things is my childhood memories are Jewish memories. That, you know, they're not really separable from, so it's very hard for me to think of my childhood without it being, you know, Jewish. It's just, it was a very, you know, my upbringing, my family, my, you know, extended family, it was
Ever
Jewish
present.
in every way, ever present.
So how was your bar mitzvah, Johnny? Was it a good do? Do you remember it?
I do remember it, yes. It was all right. We had a very small garden, but nevertheless we had a marquee in the garden, and basically the shul moved to our garden.
Oh, wow.
Because that's how we had to do it. So it was a sort of unusual one. But no, it was fine. I think the record will show, and the photographs certainly show, I did not become a man that day. This idea that people become a man, I always find that so ridiculous when you look at 13-year-old boys, bar mitzvah boys. So it wasn't that kind of day, but it was fine.
I remember being most excited about the presents, I'm ashamed to say. But do you remember what the kind of big ticket item was in your day of what was every bar mitzvah boy hoping to get his hands on?
Oh, that is such a great question. That's brilliant. That is so good. I think the object of desire was a digital watch.
Ooh.
That was so new and high tech then. And I think there was a great sort of hierarchy between LED and LCD.
Yes.
If that means anything at all.
Yeah.
And what you wanted was, the LED one was the one where the bar mitzvah would go up to you and just press the button and sort of red would light up and everyone would be very impressed. And LCD was when it was on all the time, you know.
Right.
But I think that was the object of desire. There were a few people who had the sort of bar mitzvah signet ring. You know,
yes, they survived.
With the initials. Remember the carved sort of block, sort of slightly Mount Rushmore style giant letters of initials.
Yes.
Can I just tell
I
you?
never had one of those.
Can I tell you, as a sort of a previous bat mitzvah girl, kind of hanging around you guys back then, that would have given me the ick.
Yeah, well,
Nish for me, that.
Rightly so. My overarching memory of those, and I'm happy to say I didn't have one myself, is that a friend of mine from school had the unfortunate initials of BJ, and that's what he had on his ring, and it just, I don't think it served to do anything else for him either.
No, and you don't need to complete that thought.
No.
That would be, I never had the signet ring. And in fact, when we do approach the Nish for me round, I think the signet ring, the monogram signet ring may actually be in there. So.
With you, with you, Johnny.
We'll take it.
So we've covered your Hamish flex. We think your Judah Maccabea role was, would you reckon that was your peak, or do you think you could outflex that?
Oh, I think I can outflex that.
Do it.
So I live in Stoke Newington in North London, and 15 or so years ago, there are lots of shuls here because there's Stamford Hill. So there's lots of little Stiebelech for the ultra-Orthodox. There was a liberal shul. There is a very lovely liberal shul. And there is an Orthodox shul, Wolford Road, lovely as well. My family and I would go round to all of them, but none felt just exactly right. So at the kitchen table in this house that you're speaking to me now, I and a few others sat around and we founded a shul. So I think a Hamish flex is that I am one of a group of people who co-founded New Stoke Newington Shul, which is now thriving and has a rabbi and hundreds of members and all that. But it began around this kitchen table, just a couple, just below.
I think that shits all over your shul attendance prize as.
I also got 100% in my Cheder exam, but I think still
you take it.
That takes it. Yeah.
Because
I did see the picture of you in your shul attendance prize. That is a fantastic picture.
Just going back to you founding the shul, what is it about your shul that fits you better than others?
So the appetite was, and now obviously there's quite a few that offer this, which is I wanted, and it does say something about me actually, and the whole founding group, but definitely does for me, which is we as a family wanted egalitarian principles, absolutely, but we wanted it to feel Hamisher and traditional and tunes we all knew and all of that. And I think that is in a way quite where I am, which is that I do, I think I have still despite all the world around us, politics that would line up as progressive. And at the same time, I do like things that are sort of rooted and authentic and Hamisher, to use the word we're using. And I couldn't find that option. So there was definitely a Hamisher option and there was definitely a progressive option. But the sweet spot was obviously the Goldilocks was having both. And I try and have that in my life. And we wanted it in our shul. And I think New Stoke Newington Shul does get that actually quite right.
Amazing. And does it sit within Masorti Judaism, or is it
exactly?
Separate?
Yes,
right.
Yes, exactly. The Masorti movement, our affiliation to that was partly the thing I've just said, the whole Goldilocks thing. And the other part of it was that just very personal, which is I got to know and hugely admire and still massively do Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg, who I think is a real moral leader in our community. And so I went along a lot to New North London Shul, where he was then the rabbi and is until, imminently he's going to retire as the senior rabbi there. And so the thought initially was, why don't we be a sort of satellite of them? Because it was just too far away. That was the other thing in my list of demands. We all have demands of shuls. That it be walking distance. I like that. And even if you don't actually do it, you want to be able to do it if theoretically. New North London was too far away. So we talked about that, and that's how the sort of Masorti affiliation came about. But it fits very well there, and it's incredibly well around here. So it's one of those rare shuls where the young outnumber the old considerably. Wow. There's lots of kids, and it's people in their 20s and 30 something. So I'm now that sort of crusty veteran that you would always see in shul, who was the old guy. I have become that person. So that is quite weird, actually. But there we are. So that is my Hamisher flex.
That's great, and I think so far absolutely unbeatable.
Yeah, I think so.
But because we both lived in London for quite a while, and it's interesting though on the shul front that it does seem to be a broader church, for want of a better word, than say even Manchester. I remember I became a member of Bronsbury Park, which is very much a sort of United Synagogue Orthodox shul, but that was another place where I think it had been a thriving community in the sort of 50s, 60s, then been in decline just in terms of numbers, and then became something of like a merging of four old shuls. But actually, by the time I was there, it was again a young and growing and thriving community, and the best of sort of what a shul can be, seemingly. Whereas it does feel like it's more sort of, there's still the old shuls here that there were when we were kids. It doesn't seem to have changed much, that landscape.
I'm fascinated by the story of both of you, because the thing that everyone knows about British Jewry, they think, is this move over generations, steadily more and more concentration in London, and communities that were once very strong, Glasgow and so on, shrinking down as the kids, the second, third generation, moved to London. And you two, I didn't know that you'd both done that. You'd come to London and then moved back. So sorry to reverse the table, but I am quite interested in how that happened and how untypical it is, because I'm guessing it's untypical, but maybe not.
Just didn't want our children to have London accents, really, Johnny. So we had to make a drastic move. No,
I can see that very clearly. Yeah, I can see why as well. Yeah.
No, I think obviously COVID had a massive role in sort of making our jobs more flexible, but I think that just sort of pull home was a very struggle.
That's the key difference with Mancunian Jews as well, meant that it was less of a battle. I think if either of us had family in London, I think that might have felt easier when it came to kids and childcare and the rest of it. But I think the pull was just sort of too big when both of our families were up in Manchester. But it does seem to be, it's still atypical, but it does seem to be more common than it used to be. And I think that has definitely something to do with COVID.
Oh, this has definitely to do with us.
Oh, with us, as well.
So
we're real trailblazers.
Yeah.
No, completely. Because that's very healthy, I think. I think it's been one of the unhelpful trends of British Jewry that it's becoming more and more a story of London and Manchester Jewry and nothing else. But even that, the worry was that it would just eventually be just London. And that isn't good. I mean, for all kinds of reasons we could go into, but I think that's very good if there is a sort of strong future. I mean, and the other thing is whether it's like it is the neighbourhood I live in, whether what we're really talking about is sort of Haredi ultra-Orthodox, and I know that is strong in Manchester, or whether people who look like the three of us are still present in numbers in London and Manchester.
I think it is a mix, probably a healthy mix. I think the Haredi community has multiplied enormously even in probably maybe not our lifetimes, but certainly in the time that since my dad was a kid in Manchester, it's now hugely present in North Manchester especially. But yeah, I think there's still a healthy, kind of young community, but inevitably London still calls to many.
Yeah.
I think it's just that's it's not seen now as a must to sort of to go to London and forge a path, because Manchester again has changed massively since we were kids, and it is a sort of thriving city. So that definitely helps.
Yeah.
I think it's very good.
Back to you, Johnny.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's quite a big question. What's your favourite thing about being Jewish?
Gosh, that is so huge. Isn't that good that it's huge? Rather than sort of, I think, isn't it a kind of warmth and connection with, I think it's with to be part of a people that spans both time and space is sort of an amazing thing. I mean, I was going to say about the warmth of family and all that, but lots of minorities do have that. And every Jew who saw my big fat Greek wedding sort of came out thinking, oh, right, so it's not just us. Right, this is how just minorities often are. So it's not that. It's more the idea that to be Jewish is to see yourself in history that can span centuries. So you can be reading something about the 11th century and think, and hear about people, and you can identify with them because you're of the same people. And then about space, it means you can be anywhere. So I had a wedding to go to in Lisbon last month, and we did a little walk around Lisbon, and inevitably, because you just do, don't you? You look for the little historic Jewish quarter, and then you find it, and it's just a few streets. But you think, wow, 6 centuries ago, this was a place that I would have recognized. I would have understood the people here, the conversation, not linguistically, but, culturally. And I think that's an amazing thing. It means that you do feel sort of anchored in the world. And I think often when, with technology and everything else, the world feels so dizzying. I feel there are so many people who don't know quite where they belong. And I don't feel if you're sort of, Jewish and given a lot of meaning to that, and those you've been raised with a lot of Jewish culture and tradition, I don't think you ever feel sort of adrift in the world. I think you feel as if you kind of know where you sit in the long span of it and in the kind of space of it. There's, you know where you are. And I think that's an amazing thing. I also think it does enable you to understand a lot about other cultures and other peoples. That I think that it just gives you a way in. I think a lot of people think if you're very strongly Jewish, somehow you're away from the rest of the world, that it's somehow you're in a ghetto. You're, I don't want my kids going to Jewish school because they'll be really narrow-minded, But actually, if it's done properly, a Jewish sensibility is your way in to the rest of human life. So it's very kind of universal in a funny way. And then obviously the calendar and the festivals were coming up, as we're speaking now, Rosh Hashanah is approaching. I love that. The marker of that, the food, obviously, even though I think other people would think the food is like on your negative list. I like it. And, the notion of, even though I've said I think a lot of minorities have it, they do. There just is a kind of a warmth and connection that Jews feel with each other, and it feels very precious, I think, and quite sort of valuable. We haven't got onto the negatives, but I think that would be in my
We're going to, because this is a Jewish podcast, Johnny. So we can't, we're going to have to get into them. I mean, what's your least favourite thing about being Jewish?
I mean, right now, it's sort of, we are held accountable for things that we have no control over. And that is a really, in any walk of life, if you ever said to anybody, I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you responsibility for this, but no power over it. That's, I mean, the very happy place people love is to have power over something, no responsibility. But we have the reverse. And it's at a time like these last 2 years, to feel as involved and affected by something that's going on for 2 solid years and just be also at the same time kind of spectators.
Yeah.
And necessarily quite sort of passive about it. Even if you're active and you go on demonstrations, we're not there and we can't affect it. By the way, even as I say this, I think plenty of Israelis feel this too.
I'm sure.
You know, that they're out on the streets, 400,000 of them, and they're not affecting it either. You know, I feel that's just that you've caught me at this moment, but right now, I feel that's the word that describes so many people in those is they're frustrated. You know, on Unholy the other day, we were talking about the recognition of a Palestinian state, you know, and Yonit was asking to me as somebody who's outside, you know, essentially, don't all these Europeans realize, you Brits and Europeans, it's not going to make a Palestinian state. It's not a good idea. And I said, you know, I think they probably do realize that, but they're so frustrated because nothing they can do is ever having any impact. They do all the usual things, diplomatic channels, and voters are doing petitions and demonstrations. Nothing makes any difference. So eventually people start thinking, well, there's that lever over there that I haven't pulled that. Let me pull that just to see if it does something. And, you know, I think it's born of terrible frustration. And I think Jews feel it. I think people who are joining those marches against Israel feel it. I think Jews on those marches against Israel feel it. I think, you know, it's just, there's a terrible frustration that comes with it. And, you know, we just can't walk away from it, can we? I mean, other people can walk away from a news story that's horrible and they don't want to deal with it. They can just turn over and watch MasterChef or whatever. Mind you, that's another news story. You know, they can watch the sport, you know, whereas we're just in it all the time.
And it does feel constant as well, especially this time around.
And how do you personally deal with that frustration and that feeling of sort of despondency? And, you know, what's your sort of levers of sort of helping yourself mentally to get, because I think a lot of Jewish people, like, you know, a lot of our listeners would think, yeah, I feel exactly the same. And sometimes it's so overwhelming and I don't know what to do with myself. And, you know, because we're the Hope and Joy Jewish podcast, we'd like to, you know, we'd like to share how do you deal with it? Because you are steeped in it.
Yes. So the interesting thing is on the steeped in it thing, I definitely am. By doing Unholy, I'm completely steeped in it, and I very often write the Guardian column on it. So I'm definitely steeped in it. People immediately assume, therefore, it must be even worse for you. And on one level, I do respond a little bit by thinking, it may be slightly easier for me because I get to sort of process it and metabolize it a bit. You know, that it all comes in, but then it comes out as a podcast or a column or whatever. Whereas I think it's probably even harder for people who are just absorbing it all and then carrying it around with them. Like, what's the outlet? If you're, you know, you're hearing the Today program, then you switch, dip into Haaretz, and then you've got the Guardian or other people, and all the time it's just Israel's doing another bad thing, and here's a really bad thing, and by the way, here's this worst thing that you haven't even thought of. Then what are you going to do with it? Where do you take it? Whereas I at least have a sort of mechanism to process it. So that's one part of it. The other thing, which is not a sort of deep answer, but it has definitely helped, is, you know, Unholy is not just listened to by outsiders who are sitting there upset and distressed. It is listened to in Israel by Israelis, and not just sort of Anglo-Israelis. We know this from sort of, we've got the kind of data that shows I think there's a group of people who are using it partly to learn English. I think there's a little section of the audience that sees Yonit on TV and gets a kick out of hearing her speak English, because she's a huge star in Israel. And so it's just a novelty in the way that people would watch, you know, Clive Myrie speaking French, you know what I mean? It would just be like, oh, wow, that's cool. So there's a bit of that. But there's a third level, which is just really interested in the conversation. And recently, we're now broadcasting the podcast on Channel 12 in Israel on Sunday nights.
Right.
And so the funny thing is, for me, I sometimes think of my 18, 19-year-old self who was on sort of, you know, the gap year with Habonim and wanted to, and dreamt of, you know, having some involvement in that society and sort of, you know, affecting it in some way, but obviously couldn't because, you know, moving to Israel wasn't going to meet other kind of needs in my life. And all these years later, oddly, I'm sort of having some a seat of one kind at the kind of table. And that's unexpected. I didn't ever plan for that, but that does feel better in a way. There is some small agency there, I think. It's not agency really, you're not doing anything, but you are at least heard, So that's better. But otherwise, I do think you've got to manage it. You've got to manage the intake. And I think, I've got two tips. One is you decide when you're going to take your news dose, like you would with eating. It shouldn't just be constant. The way that grazing and eating food shouldn't be all day. You can have 3 meals a day or 2 or whatever, and you decide that's when I'm going to sit down with the Haaretz app for 15 minutes and the Guardian for 10 minutes, and I'll listen to the BBC News at 6, and that's it. That's my news for the day, no more. And the crucial thing is social media has to go when it comes to this topic. And I think that there are many things that social media is good for. Instagram, I'm new to it, as you know, but recipes or whatever, fine, knock yourself out. But for discussion of Israel-Palestine, the wrong place. Do not go there for that. It will only be dispiriting and distressing. You can read the odd thing, maybe, but any kind of dialogue or conversation, oh my, what a bad idea. Do not do it there. And I was asked recently to speak at a synagogue and there's quite a few synagogues going through this, where the communities are almost coming apart over the issue of Israel. And they asked me, which was a great idea, really. They said, look, you're obviously on Unholy with someone with whom you don't agree on everything, and yet you're holding it together. You're still friends and you're still colleagues and you're doing the podcast. How do you do it? And so they say, and so I went there, and one of my sort of tips for them as a community was, do not argue with each other on Facebook or X or whatever. What are you doing?
Bad hadracha, that really, doing it out in public.
Yeah.
But I do think as well that...
Exactly, I agree. Yeah.
I think that Unholy has been a massive sort of public service almost for a lot of Jews around the world, in that dealing with the same things that you were talking about. You were saying that's your kind of mechanism to deal with it. But I know for both of us, certainly you put me onto it, a couple of years ago now almost.
Well, yeah, actually, how there are October the 8th Jews who came back to sort of Judaism after the events of October 7th. I have to admit, I'm an October the 8th Unholy fan, because I actually didn't listen to it before. I actually didn't know about it, and I don't know. And it has been, as you've been told by so many, because you've talked about it on the podcast, a lifeline in that kind of trying to process things. Every week I don't know what to think and overwhelmed, and I know I'll just listen to Johnny on your knee, and it's really, and I think so many people would agree. And I just want to get under the bonnet of it a little bit. How did you and Yachne meet? Well,
we met doing this podcast.
Did you not know each other before?
No, we didn't. And it was her brilliant idea, along with Traitor Freedland, a friend and colleague of hers from originally Channel 12. And they said we should be doing a podcast. They put their finger on something which was completely right, which is there is no place in the entire Jewish world where Israelis and Jews meet in constant dialogue. And what there is monologue, which is the trip, when Jewish leaders, always leaders, community leaders, go to Israel, where they are talked to by Israeli politicians. And there's no reciprocal back dialogue. Netanyahu will sit with 5 visitors from the Philadelphia Jewish community, and he'll tell them he won't say to them, what's the situation in Philadelphia, oh, how do you see it? It's he might, as a sort of, to be polite, but it was a one-way channel, and so she had this, and they both did, Yachne and Traitor thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see if there is a conversation to be had between the two, about all of it, about everything, the Jewish world, what's going on. And it was in the middle of COVID, and she still, Yachne, mocks me and teases me over this, because it is quite true that my thought when I said yes, we were all in another lockdown. It was a 2020 lockdown. And I thought, it will last 6 weeks. Just try it out. What can you lose? You've got plenty of time.
Got similar mentality on this one.
And, what's the worst that can happen? It's sort of what I thought, and we'll try it out, see. And I was, I really liked listening to, there's a very good podcast about my football team, Arsenal, called the Arsecast, odd name. a bit like your friend with the signet ring, actually. And I really liked that. And I thought I could really see a similar one to that on Israel and Jews. Why not? And we did it, and we've just kept on doing it ever since. And we've come to know each other through it, which is a really whole other thing. But we had no idea when we started what it would become, because obviously we didn't foresee this war and this period. And the funny thing is, if you go back to the pre-October 7 ones, and there's one in particular that she and I always talk about as a sort of shorthand of how different our lives were then, which is in the summer of 2023, our guest on the podcast was Nick Heitner, the theatre director.
From Manchester.
Is it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, indeed. Exactly. Talking about his new production of Guys and Dolls, which was a brilliant production, at the Bridge Theatre, and talking about the Jewishness of the Broadway musical. That was the theme. And he sang in the old bit of little songs and just explained how all the melodies you associate with Broadway musicals are basically Jewish melodies. And it was just fantastic. And it was just all of it. It was only kind of pleasure, the whole thing. And that's what the podcast could be like before October 7th. That's the sort of thing we could do. And then it obviously changed completely.
Gosh. Amazing that you wouldn't know to listen to it, that you haven't been friends for decades.
I mean, obviously you and your NEAT have your differences, which we hear, which are sort of along the sort of political lines, and it's really interesting to hear it. But what would you say is the biggest difference between British Jews and Israeli Jews away from politics? How would you characterise them both?
Well, it's so funny because that's, I sometimes think that Yachne is quite sort of British in her sensibility. She loves Shakespeare, she loves the theatre. She's obviously got the most extraordinary fluency in English.
Incredible.
And she's, there is a stereotype of the Israeli, and Yachne Levy does not meet that stereotype, right? And we all agree about what, we can imagine what the stereotype is. She's not that. But I think there's one really interesting difference, even about how we approach the podcast, which is I, for a very long time, recoiled at any obvious disagreement between us and thought, we can't do this. And when we really disagree and it's really bad, and sort of, I'm sure the listeners are uncomfortable when we do this. And there was shorthand for it, which was, mummy and daddy are fighting, as if the listener really doesn't want that. And she was like, oh, don't worry, people are going to love it. And she always thought that's because she was TV, and TV, it's ratings, when people clash. Maybe it is partly she's TV and I'm print, but I think it's also she's Israeli and I'm very kind of British and English, and just think, that's awkward, and that it's much better to everyone pretended to get along rather than actually have it out, So that has been one of the so there's a really interesting kind of two layers of it, aren't there? Because on one level rather, she and I are expressing different positions, but also we're expressing different approaches to conflict itself, which are just different culturally. So I think that all that plays out.
Absolutely. And the now famous episode when I think you called it In Therapy.
War Therapy.
War Therapy, yeah. Was, I think, showed just how powerful those differences could be, but also how powerful dialogue in general is as well. And that was really, I think, something where, I was already a fan by then, but that made it essential sort of listening, because it showed, the sort of multiplicity of ideas and thoughts, and while still feeling those same feelings.
So that War Therapy is, still is the episode people talk about most, and that just to go under the bonnet of it, even that is the sort of an origin of that is interesting in terms of these differences, because she was very keen we do it, and I was very, very wary of it and very nervous of it, and I had all these sort of conditions, which in the end I think actually helped make it what it was. But I said, for example, we record the whole thing on the understanding that it's not going to be broadcast if, when we listen back to it, either one of us is unhappy. So we could be totally candid, because I thought, I can say what I like because we're not obliged to do it. It was like the opposite of live broadcasting. I also said I wanted no one else on there. So there were no sort of technicians or producers or anything else. Not that there's a whole cast of thousands normally, but there were usually two other people. In those days, there were two other people on any recording, and I said it has to be just you and me. And then the other thing was that if either one, we each had sort of power of veto. So if anybody's unhappy with any bit of it, that bit will come out. In the end, I don't know whether we cut anything, but it meant there was just a sense of, in a way, kind of safe space that you could just, I felt as if I could totally speak completely candidly about it, thinking it doesn't matter, because if this sounds wrong or comes out in a way I don't mean, we can just take it out afterwards, you know.
Well, it paid off for sure.
Absolutely.
And talking about sort of cultural differences amongst Jews, you obviously also lived in America as part of your time as a US correspondent. And we've touched on this slightly on the podcast, that obviously there are many overlaps with diaspora Jews, but there are big differences between being Jewish in America and being Jewish here. And I just wondered if you had any sort of tales or stories from that time where, you found yourself amongst American Jews, but not necessarily fitting in. What do you think is the biggest difference?
The big thing is that they're just is numbers. There's just so many more of them, and therefore I hadn't quite realised how much we as British Jews have internalised being a small community, a small minority. And the biggest one is the sort of out and proud thing, really, which is I was in America in the 90s, and I hadn't realised the extent to which we as British Jews have our own sort of almost telepathic ways of communicating with each other without making a huge sort of noise about it. And American Jews just didn't need to do that. And they had this kind of confidence. And I almost made a conscious decision when I came back to Britain to sort of bring that with me and be more out,
How did that manifest itself? In what way?
Well, a good example is very soon after I came back in the beginning of 1997, and in 98, the Clinton impeachment story, Monica Lewinsky and all of that happened. And for quite a few years after I got back, The Guardian would keep sending me back to Washington to do more political stories because I knew people in the Clinton world and all that. And so it's so funny now to come back to it, but it's really in my head now. A big stage of the Monica Lewinsky story was about to happen. The publication of the report, the Star report, which was inquiring into it. And the editor of The Guardian phoned me and said, look, the Star report's coming out on Tuesday. This was, or whatever it was, whatever day, Wednesday. We want you to go out there to cover it. And I went, well, I can't do that because it's Rosh Hashanah this week. And he said, yeah, I know that's a really big deal, but this is such a big story. You've obviously got to do it. And we had this phone call, and I was only, quite low down the food chain, and he was the editor of the newspaper. And I just stood firm, and I just said, I'm, again, would love to do it. Any other story I will do. It was just not on. And I feel as if that came from somehow being in America where, Congress itself was virtually suspended on Yom Kippur.
Well, that's one for the conspiracy theorists, isn't it?
Yes, of course it wasn't. But schools in certain cities wouldn't open, and there was just so many. It's a bigger group of people, and I sort of brought some of that with me. That feeling that I'm not going to sort of ever, be sort of below radar about it. It's just who I am. I think it was because I was there in my 20s. I completely internalized it as a way of being Jewish, and that what isn't the British way, where that the classic thing is two British Jews talking to each other, even in a kosher restaurant. They'll go, Laura, she isn't Jewish, but she is a really good thing. Oh, he's Jewish, isn't he? Yeah, he is. And the voice drops. They can't help it. We can't help it. Somehow the voice drops when you say that word. Even actually the word Jew rather than Jewish. I don't know if you've had this experience, Abigail, but, colleagues only to be really sensitive, will often change the word Jew to Jewish person, right? Because they think it's sort of more polite. And I will change it back again, going, no, really, we can say, Jerry Seinfeld is a Jew. He's going to get it. You know what I mean? It's fine. And I then once explained to the company, I said, if you keep saying Jewish person, it makes it sound as if Jew is somehow a negative.
Yeah.
That is sort of, the word has to be handled with sort of tongs.
Yeah.
There was a code as well. I don't know if this was unique to Manchester, but wedge.
Wedge, yeah.
Is that used in London? Wedge is like code for a Jew.
Just Jew
Because
backwards.
it's Jew backwards,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Amongst Jews, we would often say, are they wedge? Because
Yeah.
you could say that out loud.
My grandma
Whereas-
used to say unseren, as in the Yiddish for one of us.
Yes.
Unseren,
Yes.
is it unser? Unseren,
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've heard all of these. And wedge I have been introduced to by my very good friend Jonathan Cummings, Manchester Jew to his fingertips.
Going back to you sticking
Yes.
your head, sticking your head above a parapet, you came back with this sort of American Jewish macher energy. I like to that's how I like to envision it. And obviously you are now a famous British Jew.
I would argue, but yes, okay. I'll accept it for the sake of the conversation.
you're a big deal, Johnny. And we did wonder, sort of, do you ever feel sort of responsibility for the community, and sort of you are sort of carrying the load somewhat?
I'm still very good friends with former colleague of ours, Gary Young, and he and I always would have conversations about this, about him being, a prominent black British journalist and me being a Jewish journalist, and we would talk about the different sort of things that come with it. And one of his great lines was about this sense that he's an ambassador. And, people would say to him, you're an ambassador. And he would say, well, if I'm an ambassador, where's my car? Where's my driver? Give me some of the perks of this role.
Exactly.
But people definitely do put that on you and they partly put it on you, but you, I think, him, you partly take it on, and you do feel that, how you react to something or something you say will be taken as indicative of that. But I think in a way all Jews feel that, versions of that, that sense that, I've, a good friend of mine who featured actually in that play that I did, the Royal Court, this Jews in Their Own Words, Philip Abrams, who said that he always over tips in a taxi because he doesn't want them thinking, oh, those Jews, they're so tight. And that's an amazing sort of ambassadorial self-image, isn't it? He's thinking that the guy's going to realize I'm Jewish. If I don't tip massively generously, he's going to think all Jews are sneaky. So I think, I take the point about it because I write and everything about these things, but I think all British Jews on some level do feel that. And it's quite a weight, that sense that we'll be judged. And then I sometimes, and even as I say, that's not such a great or healthy thing, I then think of the people who don't think it, and I'm really annoyed at them for not thinking it. So when Philip Green invites Beyonce to his daughter's, pays for her to come to his daughter's bat mitzvah, I'm thinking, why did you do that? That's going to look so bad on all of us. They're all going to think we're grob and over the top. Don't do that.
He's not helped with our PR, no, not much.
No. So, I maybe, and if I was more American about it, I'd think he's fine. He can do what the hell he likes. We're who we are and we don't be judged, So you tie yourself up in knots a bit with these things.
We should get on to your book.
Absolutely. We're both fangirling here with 2 copies.
Oh, look at that. That's great.
Would you like to introduce what it's about? Because you put things a lot better than I do.
Well, it's my own book, so, you shouldn't beat yourself up if I'm more familiar. So it's called The Traitor Circle. The subtitle is The Rebels Against the Nazis and the Spy Who Betrayed Them. It's about a particular group. It's a real story. It's non-fiction. It's a true story of a group of elite, high society, sometimes aristocratic Germans who were dissidents. They were against the Nazi regime. They gather in secret for a tea party on the 10th of September 1943, where they think they're going to do what they've done a few times before, which is trade information, give each other advice, and sort of plan for a Germany freed from Hitler. And what they do not know as they're talking and sharing information is that sitting around the table with them is someone who they think is one of their own, but is about to betray them to the Gestapo. And the book, as we're going to do now on this podcast, holds back who that is. You don't know who that is. And if I've done it properly, it should be offer some of the sort of sensations of reading a whodunit, where you're thinking, is it the ambassador's widow? Is it the countess? Is it the doctor? Is it the pioneering head teacher? Who is it? Is it the former model, the diplomat, And they are, to my mind, I've become very attached to them, but they are a completely fascinating group of people. There are some extraordinary people in this group. And the thing that is, the mystery of the book, there's a whodunit in there, who's the betrayer? But the really deeper mystery is, why on earth would these people who are privileged, they're well off, they have family, country estates, aristocratic names and lineage, if they kept their heads down, they would be completely fine. Nobody is coming for these people. Why on earth would they do all of that for these acts of good? And they do these acts of amazing good. They rescue people, they spirit people out of the country, they are funneling information to the outside world, and in one or two cases they are hiding Jews in their own homes at incredible mortal risk, and they didn't need to do it. And a lot of people are really obsessed with sort of evil as a phenomenon, and they write books about serial killers. And I am fascinated by deep, radical good, and that's what these people are doing. Why would they do it? And what kind of person does do it? And given that the world is sort of turning into another darkened period, I don't think these questions are purely history questions. I think these are now questions.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, this sort of the themes and the issues that were coming up as I was reading it. You can't help but think about today, and even though that actual world, sort of the idea of living under the Third Reich seems so unrelatable, there are so many parts of the book where you do extrapolate and you think, you put it on sort of today. And I kept thinking, is this sort of the ultimate act of allyship? And would they have considered themselves allies? And I didn't know if that, and that's obviously something that we think about a lot as a community at the moment. And I wondered, when you were writing it, did that come, was that in your mind? Did you think about them in that way? I mean, because yes, there are some unbelievable, I can't call them characters because obviously they're all real, but
real people.
Yeah, the women especially, like absolute badass bitches. I know you don't describe them that way, but unbelievable, and who do hide Jews. But there are some and that aren't necessarily involved to that extent. And I just wondered if you thought about them as allies.
It's such an interesting question. Obviously that vocabulary is very 2025 vocabulary. So it didn't ever strike me in those terms. But I'm tempted to say the answer actually is no, because I think what they were all doing was, in their minds, they weren't saving Jews, they were saving Germany. It was Germany that was abasing itself by becoming like this. This isn't who we are, is what they were thinking. That the good name of Germans and German culture in Germany is what had to be rescued here. That one of the people in this circle said that their mission was to show the world there was another Germany, a better Germany. We are not this. And of course that meant saving Jews, and of course they cared about Jews, but being compassionate was to them a value about them. That their own, in a way, several of them are religious, there are religious Christians, and I think they felt their own souls demanded they do this. What kind of person am I if I don't do this? So it wasn't, in terms of the actual action in the end, it ends up in the same really good place. But allyship implies to me that you're doing this wholly for them. You're going to do this thing for the person you're being an ally for. But I think they were really driven by a sense of who they were. And that's why very often when you say to people who have done amazing things, God, how on earth did you find the strength? Or why did you decide to do that? They very often go, I had no choice. And they look at you as if, obviously I had to do this. And You're thinking, no, you really didn't have to do it. It wasn't obvious, and most people didn't. But they think, I wouldn't be me if I hadn't done this. And it would be like sort of ending who I am and just throwing myself away and throwing my soul away and throwing my country away if I didn't do this. So it doesn't lessen the mystery of it, but I think these were patriotic, sometimes quite conservative Germans who believed they loved their country and their country was destroying itself and they had to save their country. At one point, one of the people in the book succumbs to terrible insomnia, and his wife finds him pacing around, and she says, "Come back, please, going back to bed and try to sleep." He goes, "How can I sleep when my country is in pain?" It's an amazing idea. He doesn't say, "How can I sleep when Jews are being herded off to concentration camps?" He just means my country is being destroyed and I love my country. So I think they weren't all, even though in some cases, absolutely in their actions, they are the ultimate allies, and they're not just going on demos and, changing in their twibbon on social media. This is allyship when you risk your life for somebody. So it's the best, but it's just, I think they conceived of it differently.
That's a fascinating response. Yeah.
Totally.
I should confess at this point, I'm only 100 pages in. Abby had a pre-advanced copy of the book, but I'm very much sort of in the kind of whodunit page turner part of the book, which I'm enjoying very much. And I'm
excellent. No, I mean, and I'm bound to say this, but I hope it continues to be page turner all the way to the end, because even though the who of the whodunit is revealed about somewhere between third and halfway through, then there becomes a whole sort of chase between this detective who is on their case.
It's so tense all the way through. And I've got to be honest with you, Johnny, thrillers usually Nisht for me. Like, I cannot, deal with more anxiety on top of the anxiety that I already sort of carry around me on a day-to-day. But this is worth it. It's worth feeling a little bit tense every night before you go to sleep. Because it's, it's so enthralling and it's so engaging and just so, Maria,
yes.
I don't want to spoil anything,
no,
but there is that moment. One of actually my favourite stories about her is, because she's a vet, is when, she does so many amazing things in the book, but that moment when she has her hand up a horse's arse. I'm going to say arse,
yes.
Johnny Freedland.
Inside, yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, a soldier kind of grabs her arse, pats her on the arse. And you finish the story.
She withdraws her arm and immediately then slaps him across the face with a whole sort of handfuls of horse feces, compacted horse feces, still on her hand. And so she physically puts this soldier, who anyone else would have been terrified of, in his place. And there's this kind of moment where she thinks, well, I'm either going to, win this standoff or I'm going to be shot dead at this moment, because she's literally slapped a soldier in authority with a fistful of horseshit.
I look forward to that bit.
Well, it's just wonderful to read because, as it's quite difficult to sort of put yourself in that world. Obviously, our worlds are entirely different, but for a lot of women who have been sort of touched inappropriately and unwelcomely, wouldn't it be great to just have a handful of manure at that point and just to be able to whack it back at them? It was just like a chef's kiss. Yes, Maria.
There are one review. I loved this review because it's set in the Telegraph. It said that it's a whodunit, and you're trying to guess which one of these people did it, but you're also simultaneously really hoping that it's not one of the characters you've sort of come to love. And I am very attached to a lot of the people in this book because, the bravery of some of these people is just jaw-dropping.
So we've probably come towards the end. I think we should. We've sort of wanged on for weeks now about our Nisht for me's, and we've had a preview of some of yours, Johnny. But it'd be great to get your sort of Nisht for me, your takeaway Nisht for me.
Certainly schmaltz herring. I think that's one. I think I'm with you on this, Abigail. I don't understand how PE. Is that one of your ones, or have I got
definitely one of mine? Yeah.
Oh, it's yours. It's yours.
Yes.
So, Aaron, we are brothers on this issue. I just do not know. It's unpalatable. I've pickled herring, I'm there. Chopped herring, certainly there. Schmaltz herring, I don't even begin to understand. My wife likes schmaltz herring, so it's an issue in the house. So that's a definite niche for me. I'm going to go with monogrammed, signet ring obviously, but kind of monogrammed anything. That's a niche for me.
Has anybody ever given you a monogrammed? I can imagine you receiving like a monogrammed notebook in your time, like a leather notebook. No, nobody's given you that.
Maybe I've conveyed my
because that would be a real kick in the face of people who have gifted you those things.
Wouldn't it be tricky now? Yeah, that would be hard. No, so I'm not a fan of that. And then there was something else. I don't even, and now it's difficult because people will associate it with October the 7th, but I've never really liked Simchas Torah. The enforced jollity thing. Not there for me.
It's a strong list.
Valid.
I'd like to think that this will be responsible for the end of those bar mitzvah rings, if indeed they still exist. This is going to stamp them out.
Oh, I now feel sorry for those who still wear them, and you're all welcome here.
They need
You're
to
all
know.
welcome.
No,
It's
they
a
need
taste
to know.
thing. It's like schmaltz herring. It's a taste. Some people love it. Some people love the monogrammed signet ring. So kol hakavod. But but it's not for me. That's the thing. It's not niche for us. It's niche for me.
Nish for me, exactly.
It's
The whole point
personal.
of a nish to me is that it's something that's generally liked by lots of other people. It's just nish to be forced fun.
It's a strong list. So I think that brings us to the end. We go. We always end with En Kelheinu Adon Olam, and if you're enjoying it, indeed they still please continue to tell people and share it with family and friends. And just a huge thank you to you, Jonathan, for joining us and talking about your brilliant book, which is out to buy now in all the places where you get books.
Go buy it. You won't regret it.
Thank you.
Maybe a little bit tense, but in a good way.
Exactly. That's how I would put it. We'll put that on the cover. A little bit tense, but in a good way. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you,
I think
Johnny.
this
Really
is
appreciate it.
this has been lovely. This has been very much not niche for me.